My husband walked into our family dinner with my cousin on his arm, smiling like the king of the world. He introduced her, Lena, the same Lena I grew up sharing sleepovers with, as his girlfriend. 20 minutes later, he was staring at divorce. Papers in front of the entire family, his face pale, his jaw clenched, and his ego shattered. The look in his eyes when he realized I'd known everything? Priceless. The dining room in my parents' lakeside home had always been a place of celebration. Warm, nostalgic, filled with stories and the smell of rosemary roasted chicken. Tonight, it was something else entirely. The soft hum of jazz floated in from the record player, a nod to my dad's love for the classics, but even that felt out of place against the thick silence building in my chest. I stood by the window, fingers grazing the lace curtain, watching the driveway with practiced calm. My pulse didn't race anymore. That part passed 2 weeks ago, the night I found everything. Now, I was just waiting. The storm had already hit. I was standing in the eye of it, eerily still. "Char, honey? Everything all right?" My mom's voice came from behind me. Gentle, knowing. Charlotte Dawson, 42, cool-headed, well-groomed, once soft-spoken, now sharper, with time and betrayal. I turned to face her with the same smile I'd worn too often these past years. It fooled everyone but her. "All good, Mom. Just checking to see if they're here." She gave me a look. The kind you get from a mother who's seen through more than one teenage lie and 30 years of high school counseling. "You don't have to pretend with me, sweetheart. You know that, right?" I nodded, swallowing the sudden lump in my throat. "I know." What I didn't say was that tonight wasn't just about dinner. It was about reclaiming something I'd let slip for too long. My dignity, my voice, my power. The table was set for 15. My parents, Ethan's parents, my younger brother David and his partner, Ethan's sister and her husband, aunts, uncles, and 2 cousins, one of whom, Lena, had spent the last 8 months sneaking around behind my back with the man I married. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was layers deep. People who should have told me didn't. People I trusted chose silence. That hurt more than the affair. When the doorbell rang, my heart stilled. Not from fear, but from clarity. I smoothed my navy dress, the one Ethan used to compliment before he stopped noticing anything about me, unless it made him look better. I reached for my purse by the console table. Inside it, printed text messages, screenshots, time-stamped photos, and a freshly signed divorce agreement. All neatly tucked in a manila envelope. "I've got it," I called out, moving toward the door with a calm so steady it scared even me. Through the frosted glass, 2 silhouettes appeared, his arm around her waist. "Of course." I opened the door. "Hi," I said smoothly. Ethan stood tall, too casual, too sure. Lena shifted beside him, not meeting my eyes. Guilt in her posture, but not enough to stop her. "Charlotte," he began, his voice low and prepared. "We need to talk." I stepped aside. "We do, but everyone's already here." He blinked, surprised by my tone. He expected tears. A scene. A breakdown. What he got was a calm I'd spent days practicing in front of the mirror. Lena followed him in, clutching her purse like a child walking into the principal's office. My mom emerged from the kitchen and froze. Her eyes scanned Ethan's, and then Lena's face, and finally settled on me. I gave her the smallest nod. She said nothing, but I could feel her shift instantly to my side. "Dinner will be ready in 20, she said coolly. "Ethan, Lena, make yourselves comfortable in the living room." As they walked away, Mom whispered to me, "What's going on?" "I've got this," I said quietly. "Just trust me." And she did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dining room buzzed with the kind of tension you could slice with a butter knife. Everyone had arrived. The table was full, and the food sat steaming, untouched, as if even the mashed potatoes sensed something was off. Conversation started and stopped awkwardly. Laughter sounded a little too forced, and eyes kept flicking toward Ethan and Lena, who had taken seats next to each other, breaking every unspoken rule of family seating arrangements. My brother David, seated directly across from me, gave me a look. A quiet question. I gave him nothing but a calm, blank expression. I wasn't ready to answer yet. Not with words. The evidence would do that for me. Ethan was oddly chipper, leaning into small talk with my father about his firm's latest project. We finally locked in that Riverside contract, he said, raising his glass like he'd won the lottery. Biggest build I've led so far. I watched him carefully. This was his comfort zone. Charming, professional, admired. That's what made this dinner the perfect stage. He had no idea he was performing in a play where I had already written the final act. And Lena's been helping, he added, tossing her a casual smile. She's got a great eye for interiors. My mother's fork paused midair. Lena, you're involved in the Riverside build? Yes, just a few suggestions here and there, she said quickly, brushing her hair behind her ear. Kind of a side gig, really. But I thought you were still working with the marketing firm, my father said, his brow furrowing. I am, she replied, fidgeting with her napkin. This is just extracurricular. That's when I leaned in slightly, just enough to let my voice carry. Extracurriculars seem to be Ethan's specialty these days. A pause. Every head turned. The table fell silent. Ethan cleared his throat, his eyes narrowing. Charlotte, can we not do this right now? I tilted my head. Do what? He didn't respond, but the shift had started. The room had noticed. Whispers flickered between eyes and forks. David broke the tension. So how long have you two been collaborating? Ethan tensed. A few months, off and on. 8 months, I corrected gently, taking a sip of water. Roughly. Lena's face turned the color of raw salmon. She looked at Ethan, then down at her lap. My mother straightened her back. Is that true? Still, Ethan said nothing, and that was when I knew. He was realizing how deep the water really was. He thought he'd blindside me tonight, parade his mistress into a family dinner and force my hand. But I hadn't just come prepared. I'd come to end it. I let the silence linger, thick and uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Lena whispered suddenly, voice cracking. Charlotte, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. The room held its breath. But it did, I said softly. And it's been happening for almost a year. While I was helping Ethan pay off his student loans, Lena was helping herself. To my marriage. A few gasps. One of my aunts dropped her fork. Ethan stood abruptly. All right, enough. This is a family dinner. Let's not turn it into a revelation, I offered. Because that's exactly what it is. David turned to Ethan, his voice low and sharp. You brought your affair to a family dinner. What did you expect? Ethan's sister Beth looked horrified. Her husband stared at his plate like it had become the most fascinating thing in the world, and yet Ethan still clung to denial. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be? Am I? I reached down beside my chair and set the manila envelope gently on the tablecloth. Because I thought maybe you'd like to explain this to everyone. He stared at it like it might explode. Lena looked like she wanted to disappear. You told her it was over, I said, keeping my tone even. And you told me you were working. Late. You said she was family. You lied to both of us. Charlotte, can we talk in private? We've done enough talking in private. You made it public the moment you walked through that door with her on your arm. The room was frozen. The only sound was the slow creak of my father setting down his wine glass. And still, I hadn't even opened the envelope. Not yet. Not until... The timing was perfect. I looked around the table, at every face that had smiled politely and hugged me at the door. Some looked shocked. Others looked guilty. "Some of you knew," I said, letting my eyes fall on Beth. "And you said nothing." Her lips parted like she might deny it, but then she lowered her eyes instead. My voice softened, but the steel was there. "It's not just the affair, it's the silence, the pretending, the lies." And then I smiled, small, cold, certain. Dinner was just getting started. I hadn't planned to say more. I thought the envelope would do the talking. But something about Ethan's face, still full of arrogance, still convinced he could spin this, made me want to go further. He had built our marriage on control, subtle digs, quiet corrections, and carefully managed lies. Tonight, I was tearing it all down. "You remember last month?" I said, my voice even. "When you told me you were flying to Atlanta for that pitch meeting? You left early Thursday morning, came back Sunday night, said the client needed you for the weekend." Ethan shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. "Well, I decided to do a little spring cleaning while you were gone. I found your tablet shoved in the back of your desk drawer, still logged in, no passcode. You always said security was a waste of time." I paused, then added, "Thank you for that." Lena exhaled sharply through her nose, a sound halfway between regret and panic. Her eyes searched for an exit. There wasn't one. I didn't go digging for trouble. But when the screen lit up and I saw her name pop up, "Can't wait for this weekend," I stopped pretending. I read it all. Hundreds of messages, photos, hotel confirmations, plans to move in together, conversations about me. Ethan opened his mouth, then shut it. "I saved every file," I continued. "I printed the ones that mattered. I even sent a copy to my lawyer. That's what's in the envelope, along with a signed divorce agreement and an itemized summary of the joint account withdrawals you made without telling me." A ripple moved through the table. My aunt gasped. My mother's hand closed into a fist on her napkin. My father's expression hardened into something I hadn't seen since he caught a neighborhood kid keying his car when I was 13. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the confident smile now long gone. "Charlotte," he said, quieter now, "we don't need to do this here." "I think we do," I said. "Because for 8 months, you've made me feel like I was going crazy. You criticized my work, mocked the way I dressed, treated my concerns like they were paranoia. And all the while, you were doing exactly what I feared most." "You think I haven't paid for that already?" he snapped suddenly, voice rising. "I've been miserable, Charlotte. We were miserable." A beat. I leaned forward, voice low, and razor sharp. "You weren't miserable when you booked a suite in Napa with my cousin. You weren't miserable when you used our shared Amex to buy her a designer bag for her birthday. You weren't miserable when you told her I was controlling and cold." I saw the messages, Ethan. He looked around the room like someone might jump in to save him. No one moved. "And Lena," I said, turning to her for the first time, "I want you to know, this isn't just about Ethan. It's about what you did to someone who always defended you, who helped you move after your breakup, who loaned you money when you lost your job." She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I smiled, not cruelly, but without pity. "But you did." Beth, Ethan's sister, finally spoke. "Charlotte, I didn't know it. Was this bad? I knew something was going on, but—" "You knew," I said, not bitter, just tired. "You covered for him. You told me he was working late when he wasn't. You looked me in the eyes and said you'd check on him for me." Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. David leaned forward, jaw tight. "And you—" He shot a glance at Ethan. "You thought you could pull this off. You thought bringing her here, parading her in front of all of us, would go unnoticed." Ethan slumped in his seat, the weight of humiliation finally sinking in. "I think," I said, standing slowly and picking up the envelope. It's time everyone saw what you've both been hiding. I walked around the table, placing the manila envelope right in front of Ethan. I didn't need to open it. Just the sight of it, the symbol of the truth, the proof, the final nail, was enough. He stared at it like it might detonate. "I'll be moving out next week," I said, straightening my shoulders. "The house is in my name, but you can keep your things. What little of them still belongs to you." Then I turned to Lena, who looked like she was trying not to cry. "You can keep him, but you'll never have what you stole from me, because it was never yours to begin with." And just like that, I was done. I didn't need more words. I didn't need applause or pity. I had said what I came to say, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. No one moved as I stepped back to my seat. The envelope sat in front of Ethan like a loaded weapon, heavy with truth, impossible to ignore. The table that had once held laughter, toasts, and warm memories was now thick with silence, betrayal hanging in the air like smoke. Ethan didn't touch the envelope. He just stared at it, as if willing it to disappear. But it wouldn't. Neither would the facts, the photos, or the things he couldn't unsay. I reached for my wine, took a slow sip, and glanced at the people around the table. Some still looked stunned. Others couldn't meet my eyes. But one thing was certain. The version of Charlotte they thought they knew was gone. I stood again, calm and deliberate. "One more thing," I said. "This isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness." I turned to Ethan, letting the weight of my gaze rest fully on him. "I let you take the lead in everything. I supported your career, handled the house, the finances, the social calendar. I lost myself trying to be the kind of wife you said you wanted. But here's the part you didn't expect. While you were sneaking around, I was preparing. And I didn't just bring divorce papers tonight." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small USB drive, setting it beside the envelope. "This," I said, "contains documentation of every financial transaction tied to your firm that you funneled through our joint accounts without disclosure. Some of it is technically illegal, all of it is unethical, and I've already sent it to your firm's compliance officer." Ethan paled. "You wouldn't." "I did. 2 days ago." Lena looked at him in horror. "You said none of that could be traced." He didn't answer. He couldn't. "And that Riverside contract you bragged about?" I added. "I spoke to the head of the development board. Turns out they take insider conflicts of interest pretty seriously. Especially when your so-called design consultant is also your affair partner. Congratulations. You've likely just tanked your biggest project." He looked like he was about to be sick, and for a moment, I almost pitied him. But only for a moment. My father finally spoke. "Charlotte, if you want us to ask them to leave, say the word." I looked toward the front door, then back at Ethan and Lena. "No need," I said. "They won't be staying." I gathered my purse, nodded, once to my mother, then leaned down to hug David, who whispered in my ear, "You're a damn force of nature." I smiled. Then, without another word, I walked toward the hallway. As I passed Ethan's chair, he reached out, not to stop me, but maybe just to feel like he still had a say. I didn't even look at him. At the door, I paused, turning back one last time. "I spent years trying to be enough for you. Then I realized I was always too much for someone so small." The latch clicked behind me as I stepped outside into the evening air. Cool, quiet, free. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying a 100-pound weight on my back. I didn't feel like I had to justify my anger or shrink to make someone else comfortable. I felt new, rewritten. I didn't know exactly what was waiting for me on the other side of this chapter, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't be looking back. Not at Ethan, Not at the life I built to please everyone but myself, because walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning.